Purpose of today's demonstration is to talk about PeopleSoft transactions and how we can measure those transactions. So to begin with, let's just take a look at a stream of hits. And these hits come in and we watch them as they come in across the wire. So all we're going to see streaming in are individual hits like GIFs, JPEGs, PeopleSoft posts, all different types across the wire. In order to make sense of these hits, what we'll do is we'll start grouping them together according to page. So we'll say these 5 hits or 10 hits belong to a particular page. We'll then start looking at which business transactions happen. So page 1, page 2, and page 3, they all have components that would trigger off steps in a particular business transaction. Now all of the hits and the pages and the transactions, they're all maintained within a single user session. So the user session is the container that holds the state of each of these different items. So without further ado, we're going to jump now into looking at specific searches on sessions, on transactions, and even on individual hits and how we can use them in a PeopleSoft environment. Now that we understand the basic concepts of the different components of end user, let's take a look at the different ways that we can search on transactions. So if I click on search, I can search for a transaction, and as we discussed before, this is a series of steps. And what I'll look at here is a specific transaction where we have MasterCard purchases. And if I search this transaction over time, I can see that there were 47 purchases started and 20 completed, which means that the 27 aborted. These are each of the sessions that completed this transaction. I can also search for specific user sessions, and this would have a different set of properties. So this is a specific user session that had a certain session identifier, and we can extract different information from this session so that we can uniquely identify them by login or by some type of different attributes that we extract from the hits as they come through for that session. A third way to search is on specific hits. So a hit filter, what it lets you do is search for very specific items within a page. So one of the ways to search by these are called hit filter searches. What I have here is I have a hit filter search, and what I could look for is something very specific, and one of these very specific searches could be something within PeopleSoft that would make sense to search on. So I can go PeopleSoft transactions specifically, and we look for anything with PeopleSoft in it. Now what I did on this filter, and we'll take a look at that in a minute, is I said specifically for PeopleSoft, search any URL that has information that includes an ICA session inside it. So what I did is I said search for any hits, and like I said, that's the one component on a page. Search for any hits that have a field called IC action. This IC action field is going to identify a transaction that's executed within PeopleSoft. So now what I can do is I have these requests that I searched on, is I can click on any one of these to look at more of the information on a specific hit, or I can trigger on certain attributes of this hit to set off any alarms that I wanted to. So just to recap, with this filter I'm specifically capturing requests on a page that have IC action as one of the request fields, and they're posts. So all these are going to be posts to the server. Now what I can do once I capture one of these transactions, like I said, I can alert on it, or I can click on a session and I could actually replay. Now what a replay does is it takes me down to that specific component in the page where that IC action was executed, but you can also open up each of the different pages to look at all the subcomponents underneath. So these will take you into style sheets and JavaScripts. But what we're doing in this case, for this use case, is specifically calling out these IC action transactions. Now what I can do further here, and let's go, so far we saw how we can search on these, and we were able to go search, and I'm just going to recap that real quick. Search hits, and what I did is I searched on something called a hit filter, and the hit filter name was PeopleSoft transactions. And what I'm going to do next is we're going to take a look at how we built this PeopleSoft transactions filter so that we can understand the components behind it. So if we would go to Configure Hit Analysis, and then inside Hit Analysis, you'll have a component in there where you can define what we call hit filters. And this hit filter that as I mentioned earlier, we searched on, it was called PeopleSoft Transactions. And if I edit this filter, we can see the components that it's comprised of. So PeopleSoft Transactions, they're going to match. So what they're going to do is they're going to search the hit, and again, that's the component on the page, and they're going to search the hit and look for a request field called IC action. If this request field exists, then the hit filter match condition is met. Now we tell it what to do after it meets the match condition. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying set a warning on this hit if it's more than 3,000 milliseconds. Okay. Further, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to update two metrics. So the $0 here is saying to create what we call a dynamic metric, and that means it's going to populate using the name of the request field as the beginning of the metric. And then this one here is measuring the warning condition, which is over 3 seconds, and then this one is just giving me a general count of all my IC actions. Okay, so this way, if we have a new IC action that we either define or use in PeopleSoft, this will dynamically populate a value, actually a value for over 3 second requests, and a second value just for the raw count of these transactions. Now, any of these metrics that you define, these automatically get sent to our Foglight portal. And let's take a look at what we can do within the portal. So now within the Foglight portal, I can do is for my PeopleSoft CRM specifically, I have HR payroll and I have PeopleSoft login. So I'm measuring the logins, and these are request groups. So now what I can do to go further is I can go over to my builder, and I am going in a bit of detail here just so you can understand all the working components. So I'm going to go into my builder and I'm going to look for those transactions that are coming across, just to give you an idea of how we can make one of these for PeopleSoft. So now I'll open up my PeopleSoft CRM, and I'm going to add another request group, which is one of the ones that we just started tracking. So in this request group, what I'm going to call is I'm just going to add one called new ICA trans. And this is a new ICA transaction, so what you'll do is you'll see that added in PeopleSoft as a new component. Now I could measure this specifically. I could measure this new ICA transaction specifically or globally, meaning I could define it just for a specific region, or in this case what I'm going to do for my new ICA transaction is I'm going to define a global container for it. So that means it'll reflect the entire world, so any ICA transactions, meaning we don't differentiate by geography. So now if I open this up, I can search for these content validation metrics, which are the one I defined earlier, and I'll search on trans. Okay. Now these are the PeopleSoft transactions, so I have RC case. This is one of the PeopleSoft requests, and I could look and I could see I have the count and I have the time. So again, that specific piece on the page, and I'll submit this. And just real quickly to finish up, I just want to show you what we've created. Now if I click on New ICA Trans, it brings me into its own page, and it's going to show me the count for the transactions, and then the count that are over the 3 second threshold. So what I can do is I can click on the count itself, and it'll bring me into the appliance and show me all of the sessions that had these specific hits on them with their response times. Or what I'd be able to do is, if we did have some requests that were over 3 seconds, I could drill on those specifically and look at those. So this concludes our demonstration, and I hope this gives you a good understanding of how we can either look at a PeopleSoft transaction across multiple hits and pages, or we can zoom in on a very specific component on the page to measure its performance, as we're doing here today. Thank you for your time.